Long before European colonization, Native Americans practiced rituals so extreme that missionaries tried to outlaw them. Imagine fasting 4 days, bleeding onto sacred ground, or ingesting peyote to speak with spirits. By 1830, U.S. officials banned ceremonies like the ghost dance, fearing rebellion. But these traditions survived. Here are 10 you won't believe are real. Chapter 1. The Sun Dance. Picture hundreds gathered on the plains, drums pounding, and men tethered to a sacred pole by skewers in their chests. Could you endure this for days without food or water? The Sun Dance is one of the most powerful and misunderstood ceremonies in Native America. Practiced by the Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Blackfeet, it was never about spectacle. It was a declaration of sacrifice for the survival of the people. Every summer, usually around the June solstice, families built a massive lodge. In the center stood a cottonwood pole, the tree of life, freshly cut and ritually cleansed. Dancers fasted and prayed for 4 days straight, consuming no food or water. The ceremony climaxed when young men had wooden skewers driven through the skin of their chests or shoulders. These skewers were tied to ropes fastened to the pole. Then they danced, leaning back until the flesh tore free. A moment of ecstatic release believed to connect the dancer to Wakantanka, the great mystery. A Lakota elder once explained, "You give your flesh because you have nothing greater to give. Your body is your prayer." Missionaries were horrified. U.S. agents outlawed the sun dance in 1883 under the Code of Indian Offenses, calling it heathenish mutilation. But ceremonies continued in secret for nearly a century. In 1978, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act finally made it legal again. Photographs from the early 1900s show men standing calmly as the skewers were inserted. Proof that courage and faith can merge in ways outsiders will never fully understand. If you think this was intense, wait until you see how the Mandan took it even further, suspending warriors from beams high above the ground. Chapter 2. The Blackfeet Thirst Dance. Imagine slicing your own arms open while hundreds watched, the blood flowing freely onto sacred earth. Would you have the strength to keep dancing, even as your vision blurred? Among the Blackfeet Nation, the thirst dance, sometimes called the Okan, was one of the most intense ceremonies on the northern plains. It was held in late summer, often in July, when the buffalo herds were believed to be listening. The purpose was simple and staggering: sacrifice your own pain to ensure the herds returned to feed the people. For days beforehand, dancers purified themselves. They fasted, bathed in cold rivers, and smoked sacred tobacco. On the final day, men entered the lodge to begin the ordeal. Elders used sharpened bone knives to make long, deliberate cuts across the dancers' arms, shoulders, and backs. Sometimes dozens of wounds. The blood was allowed to drip onto the ground, an offering to the Great Spirit and the buffalo. One Blackfeet warrior described it: "You dance until you forget the pain. Then you dance until you remember your purpose." Outsiders were horrified. A British explorer who witnessed the thirst dance in 1833 wrote that he nearly fainted when he saw a young man calmly wiping rivers of blood from his belly with a sprig of sage. But to the Blackfeet, these sacrifices were necessary to renew the bond between humans and animals. If the buffalo disappeared, starvation would follow. The ceremony could last 2 full days, and dancers often collapsed. When the cuts healed, scars were worn proudly as proof of devotion. In the late 1800s, U.S. agents declared the thirst dance barbaric and banned it. Yet families continued in secret, keeping the tradition alive even as officials threatened imprisonment. If you think bleeding was the limit, just wait. The Comanche took their initiation rituals even further, with fire, bone, and raw endurance. Chapter 3. The Comanche Torture Test. Imagine being 12 years old, knowing your first test as a man would be to endure days of torment without a scream. Among the Comanche, pain wasn't just a right, it was proof you were worthy to carry weapons. The Comanche were legendary horsemen, dominating the southern plains for 2 centuries. But before a boy could ride to war, he had to prove unshakable courage. Accounts from Spanish captives in the 1700s describe initiation rituals so severe that hardened soldiers wept to watch them. The ordeal began with elders leading boys, some as young as 12, into a specially prepared circle. Here they were stripped naked and painted with black symbols representing death and rebirth. Then came the first test, beating with willow rods. Each initiate was struck hundreds of times on the back, legs, and arms, while elders chanted prayers. Any whimper of pain brought more blows. Next, boys walked slowly over a path of hot coals, embers glowing red. They were forbidden to run or cry out. Survivors often carried burn scars on their feet for life. Finally, warriors used smoldering sticks to scorch the boys' shoulders, believed to brand them with spiritual power. One Spanish chronicler wrote in 1723, "These trials are designed to kill weakness and forge the mind like iron." If a boy passed without complaint, he earned the right to carry weapons and wear a warrior's feathers. If he failed, he waited another year to try again. By the late 1800s, missionaries denounced this ritual as satanic cruelty. The U.S. Army, constantly at war with the Comanche, cited these practices as justification for conquest. But to the Comanche themselves, this was sacred, proof that survival demanded unbreakable will. If you stay with me, I'll show you an even more astonishing ceremony, the Mandan Okipa, where men were suspended from wooden beams until their flesh tore free. Chapter 4. Mandan Okipa. Ceremony. Imagine stepping into a circular lodge, the air thick with sage smoke, knowing you would leave only after your flesh ripped open. The Mandan called it the Okipa, and no other ritual on the northern plains inspired more awe or fear. The Okipa was performed by the Mandan every summer near the Missouri River villages. This wasn't a ceremony for everyone. It was reserved for men who sought visions, status, or the right to protect the tribe. George Catlin, an artist who witnessed it in 1832, described it as the most solemn and appalling rite ever performed. The preparation took weeks. Participants fasted 4 days, drank only water, and spent hours in sweat lodges purifying their bodies. On the final day, the ordeal began. Elders pierced each man's chest or shoulder muscles with wooden skewers carved from willow. Rawhide thongs were threaded through the wounds and tied to beams high above the lodge floor. Then came the test of endurance. Initiates were hoisted into the air and left hanging by their own flesh, their feet dangling. They stayed until they either fainted or tore free. Some remained suspended for hours. As they hung, attendants placed buffalo skulls on the ground and tied them to the men's legs, adding weight that pulled harder on the wounds. The purpose was not torture, but transcendence. It was said the pain opened a doorway to the spirit world. Witnesses were stunned. One trader in 1835 wrote, "Not a single cry escaped them. It was as if they no longer felt the earth beneath them." After the suspension, initiates crawled to a fire and presented tobacco to the elders, proof of their courage. Their scars became lifelong emblems of honor. When missionaries arrived, they called the Okipa pagan butchery and lobbied to outlaw it. By the late 1800s, U.S. agents banned the ritual under federal law. But the memory remained so powerful that it was revived in the 20th century as a symbol of Mandan identity. If you think this was the limit, wait until you learn about the hallucinogenic journeys of the Peyote Vision Quest. Chapter 5. Peyote Vision Quest. Imagine swallowing a bitter cactus button, your mouth dry as dust, and hours later watching the sky split open with visions. This was no party. It was a sacred conversation with the spirit world. The Peyote Vision Quest is one of North America's oldest hallucinogenic rituals. The Huichol, Navajo, and Plains tribes all practice forms of peyote ceremonies. Archaeological evidence shows peyote use in Texas rock shelters over 5,000 years old. During ceremonies, the dried crown of the Laphophora Williamsi cactus was ground into powder or chewed raw. The active chemical, mescaline, induces intense visual and auditory hallucinations. One 19th century missionary in Oklahoma wrote, "They sat motionless as stone, but claimed to ride above the clouds in their minds." Ceremonies could last up to 48 hours. Participants formed a circle inside a teepee or brush arbor. A ceremonial fire burned in the center, representing the sun and the Creator's presence. Songs were sung in low, repetitive chants, and gourd rattles kept the rhythm steady. The leader, often called a roadman, guided the group through cycles of prayer, silence, and storytelling. Peyote wasn't taken lightly. Visions were considered messages, sometimes warnings, from ancestors or deities. Many tribes believed the cactus could heal sickness, cleanse guilt, and show the path to a balanced life. Colonial authorities tried hard to stop it. Spanish missionaries in the 1600s condemned peyote as the devil's root. In 1918, the Native American Church was founded to protect the practice legally. Today, it's the only federally recognized religious use of a Schedule I substance in the United States. A Navajo elder once said, "Peyote is our teacher. It shows you what you refuse to see. If you stay with me, I'll take you to the Apache sunrise ceremony, 4 days of dance, song, and exhaustion that transform girls into women." Chapter 6, Apache Sunrise Ceremony. Imagine being only 12 years old and standing at the center of your entire community, knowing you wouldn't sleep for 4 days. For the Apache, this wasn't punishment. It was a transformation as sacred as life itself. The Apache Sunrise Ceremony, or Nai'is, marks a girl's passage into womanhood. It's among the most demanding coming-of-age rituals in North America. Anthropologists have traced its origins back hundreds of years, long before Spanish contact. The ceremony begins at sunrise and continues for 4 consecutive days. The girl, called the initiate, is painted with a sacred yellow pollen paste mixed with oils, symbolizing fertility and strength. Elders cover her skin in a thick layer of earth-colored clay, believed to link her spirit to the first woman, white-painted woman, who survived a great flood and gave birth to the Apache people. Throughout the days, she must dance for hours at a time, arms outstretched, palms turned to the sky. She listens to hundreds of songs sung in Apache, each telling stories of creation and endurance. At night, she can only rest in short intervals on a specially prepared bed of blankets and cedar. Missionaries and U.S. officials tried to ban the ceremony in the late 1800s, calling it pagan superstition. Yet families carried it on in secret. By the 1930s, some anthropologists realized its true power. It preserved identity when everything else was under attack. During the final night, medicine men perform a healing ritual. They touch her with eagle feathers, offer prayers, and call for blessings on her life. When dawn comes, she emerges transformed, a woman recognized by her people. One elder said, "When she dances, she carries the memory of every woman before her. If you stay with me, you'll witness a darker side of ritual, the Seneca mourning wars, where grief was healed through capture and blood." Chapter 7, Seneca mourning wars. Imagine losing your brother in battle and being told the only way to heal your grief was to capture a stranger to replace him. Among the Seneca in the Iroquois Confederacy, mourning was never passive. It was a reason for war. The mourning wars were a structured, ritualized cycle of vengeance and healing, practiced for centuries across the Northeast. When a clan member died, grief wasn't considered finished until the spiritual gap they left was closed. So warriors were sent to raid enemy villages, Mohawk, Susquehannock, or Algonquin, and bring back captives. French Jesuit missionaries in the 1640s described the practice with a mix of horror and fascination. They take their enemies as one takes a sapling from the forest to plant it in place of the tree cut down. Once captives were brought home, their fate depended on the community's needs. Some were ceremonially tortured and executed to satisfy vengeance. But many, especially women and children, were adopted into the clan to replace the dead. After a ritual washing and renaming, they were treated as family for life. By the late 1600s, historians estimate thousands of captives were adopted in this way, permanently altering the demographic makeup of the Iroquois. A 1670 French report stated that nearly 1/3 of the population of some villages were adoptees. Even the practice of scalping, often seen as pure brutality, was partly a spiritual gesture, a way to claim the spirit of the fallen enemy and balance loss. When colonial wars erupted, especially during the Beaver Wars, mourning war raids expanded dramatically. Entire villages were depopulated in a single season, fueling European fears of savage cruelty. But for the Seneca, it was survival, honoring their ancestors, healing the living, and keeping their world in balance. If you stay with me, I'll show you the ghost dance, a ritual so powerful it terrified the U.S. Army into violent repression. Chapter 8, the Ghost Dance. Imagine hundreds of men and women circling in dust and song, arms raised to the sky, believing that if they danced long enough, their lost loved ones would return. In the late 1800s, this hope became a movement the U.S. government could not tolerate. The ghost dance began in 1889, when a Paiute prophet named Wovoka had a vision during a solar eclipse. He saw a world renewed, the dead reunited with the living, the buffalo herds restored, and white settlers vanished from stolen lands. Wovoka taught that through a ritual of dance and song, this transformation could be summoned. His message spread like wildfire. Within a year, Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Shoshone communities were organizing ghost dances that lasted for days. Participants gathered in large circles, moving rhythmically to sacred songs, often until they collapsed from exhaustion. The ceremony involved wearing special garments called ghost shirts, painted with symbols believed to make bullets pass harmlessly through the wearer. By 1890, U.S. authorities saw the movement as an existential threat. The Bureau of Indian Affairs labeled it a dangerous outbreak of fanaticism. Indian agents on reservations filed panicked reports claiming the ghost dance was a prelude to war. Tension came to a head on the Pine Ridge Reservation. When Lakota leader Sitting Bull was killed by Indian police trying to arrest him, fear and rage spread. Just weeks later, the U.S. Army surrounded a Lakota encampment at Wounded Knee. On December 29, 1890, soldiers opened fire. More than 250 men, women, and children were killed in the snow, the last major massacre of the Indian Wars. But the ghost dance didn't die. It lived on in songs and memories, a reminder that no law could fully crush the longing for freedom. If you stay with me, you'll see a ritual of wealth and destruction, the Tlingit potlatch, where fortunes went up in flames to honor the spirit world. Chapter 9, Tlingit Potlatch. Imagine watching a chief set fire to piles of canoes, blankets, and copper shields, everything he owned, just to prove he was more powerful than any rival. Among the Tlingit, Haida, and Kwakiutl of the Pacific Northwest, this wasn't madness. It was a potlatch. The potlatch was a ceremonial feast and gift-giving event practiced for centuries. Its purpose was as complex as it was dramatic: to redistribute wealth, mark marriages and funerals, and cement a leader's authority. It could last days or even weeks, involving hundreds of guests from rival clans and neighboring villages. At the height of a potlatch, hosts gave away or destroyed enormous amounts of wealth. Canoes were chopped apart, woven chilkat blankets burned, and elaborately worked copper plates, some worth the price of a slave, were broken or thrown into the sea. One explorer in 1799 wrote, "I saw a chief burn everything he possessed simply to show he feared no poverty." Anthropologists later called it competitive generosity. To outsiders, it looked like waste. But in Tlingit culture, destroying wealth elevated status far beyond hoarding it. A chief who could give away everything demonstrated spiritual abundance and social dominance. When missionaries and Canadian officials saw these ceremonies, they were horrified. In 1884, the Canadian government outlawed potlatches under the Indian Act, claiming they were debauched and unproductive. People caught hosting, one could be jailed or fined. Despite the bans, families continued potlatches in secret, disguising them as birthday gatherings or memorial services. Elders hid ceremonial regalia, masks, drums, and coppers in caves and remote cabins to avoid confiscation. The law wasn't repealed until 1951. When the ban lifted, many communities immediately resumed potlatching, proving that generosity could never be fully stamped out. If you think burning fortunes was the ultimate test, wait until you hear about the Pawnee Morning Star sacrifice, an offering so extreme it stunned even seasoned explorers. Chapter 10, Pawnee Morning Star. Sacrifice. Imagine a dawn ceremony so shocking that even hardened frontiersmen stood in silence, unable to look away. Among the Pawnee, the Morning Star ritual was the most extreme and most misunderstood sacred practice on the plains. For the Pawnee, the cosmos was alive. The Morning Star and the Evening Star were lovers whose union renewed all life. To honor them, the Pawnee performed a ritual sacrifice each spring, believed to ensure the fertility of crops and people. Anthropologist George Grinnell interviewed elders in the 1890s, who described how the ceremony was prepared with profound care. The victim was usually a young captive girl, chosen for her beauty and health. She was adopted into a Pawnee household and treated with deep respect, fed the best food and dressed in fine clothes. She was not seen as property, but as a living embodiment of the evening star. The ceremony began before dawn. Hundreds gathered as priests led the girl to a scaffold of sacred cottonwood poles. She was bound in a spread eagle position, facing the east, toward the rising morning star. As the first rays of sunlight touched the earth, a priest shot her through the heart with a ceremonial arrow. Her blood was considered the renewal of all life. French traders in the 1700s were stunned by the ritual, calling it a sacrifice most ancient and unrelenting. But to the Pawnee, it was a supreme act of devotion. They believed that without it, the balance of the world could collapse. The last known morning star sacrifice occurred in 1838. Under pressure from missionaries and the U.S. government, Pawnee leaders formally agreed to abandon the practice. Yet among elders, the memory remained, a testament to a cosmology that saw no line between sacrifice and survival. If you've stayed with me this far, you now know these ceremonies weren't savage. They were the heartbeat of nations determined never to forget who they were. If these stories fascinated you, subscribe now for more hidden histories. Comment below which ritual surprised you most, and share this video to help keep these truths alive for everyone.